Some people don't realize what they have until they lose control over it. And some people don't realize who they're mistreating until life forces them to say that person's name with respect. For years, I lived in a house where I was not treated like family. I was treated like help. But everything changed the day a hospital called, and my name suddenly became the only thing that mattered. My name is Hannah Miller. I am 34 years old and I live in Texas, USA. And this is the story of how my in-laws treated me like a maid for years, until one phone call from a hospital changed everything forever. It started the day I got married. At first, I thought I was joining a family, but I quickly learned I was joining a hierarchy, and I was at the bottom. My mother-in-law didn't call me by name. Ever. To her, I was the girl or she. My father-in-law barely acknowledged me, and my husband stayed quiet. Too quiet. From the beginning, I was expected to cook, clean, serve, and obey. Not because I was asked politely, but because it was assumed. As if my presence in that house automatically made me responsible for it. At first, I tried to adjust. I told myself it was temporary, that respect would come with time. But time didn't bring respect. It only made expectations heavier. I cooked every meal. I cleaned every room. I served every guest. And still, I was never included in conversations that mattered. Only in tasks. One evening, I remember clearly. I was cleaning the dining table after everyone finished eating. My mother-in-law looked at me and said, "Don't forget to mop the floor properly this time." She didn't even look up from her tea. That wasn't a request. That was my identity in that house. My husband heard it and said nothing. That silence hurt more than the words. Because silence from the person who is supposed to protect you becomes permission for others to mistreat you. Years passed like that. Slowly, quietly, without change. Until I stopped expecting change at all. I just survived. Then one morning, everything broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with a phone call. From a hospital. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me pick up. "Is this Hannah Miller?" a voice asked. "Yes," I replied. The pause that followed felt strange. Then the person spoke again. "This is St. Mary's Hospital. You are listed as the emergency contact for a patient." My heart tightened immediately. "Who?" I asked. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "It's your mother-in-law." For a moment I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. Because suddenly I was the girl anymore. I was the maid anymore. I was the only person they could call. "Condition?" I asked quickly. The voice lowered. "Critical." I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember driving. I only remember one thing. For the first time in years, they needed me. When I arrived at the hospital, everything was different. Doctors moving fast. Family members arriving late. Confusion everywhere. But when they saw me, something changed. The same people who ignored me at home suddenly stood up. Because they didn't know what was happening. And I did. Or at least, I was the only one who could find out. A nurse approached me immediately. "Are you family?" I nodded. And for the first time in years, my last name mattered. Inside the waiting area, my husband finally arrived. His face was pale. But when he saw me, he didn't look at me like before. He looked at me like I was necessary. "What did they say?" he asked. I shook my head. Nothing yet. But I could feel it. Something was shifting. Then the doctor came out, looked around, and said, "Who is Hannah Miller?" And every head turned toward me. That moment changed the entire room. Because suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the center. The doctor explained everything quickly. Decisions needed. Signatures needed. Emergency authority needed. And there was only one name listed. Mine. My in-laws froze. Because they realized something they had never considered. The woman they treated like a maid was now the only person with legal authority in that moment. And in that hospital corridor, the way they said my name changed forever. Not out of habit, not out of dismissal, but out of need. Respect and urgency. The hospital corridor felt different after the doctor spoke my name. Not louder, not more crowded, just heavier. Because suddenly everyone who used to ignore me was now waiting for me to act. The doctor repeated it again, more firmly this time. "We need consent from Hannah Miller for immediate surgery approval." Silence. My mother-in-law's face changed instantly. For the first time, she didn't look in control. She looked dependent. My husband stepped closer. "Sign it," he said quickly. "Whatever they need, just sign it." I looked at him. Not angrily. Not emotionally. Just clearly. "Do you remember how many years I was not included in decisions in your house?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Because he knew. The doctor waited. Time was running. But I didn't move immediately. Not because I didn't care, but because something inside me was shifting. Years of being invisible don't disappear in seconds. They echo. My mother-in-law finally spoke. Her voice was different now. Not sharp. Not commanding. Careful. "Hannah, please." That was the first time she used my name properly. And she hated needing it. I looked at her. The same woman who once made me feel like a servant in her home. Now standing in front of me. Waiting. I signed the papers. Not out of revenge. But because life was still life. And someone was still fighting for theirs. As soon as I handed the document back, everything moved fast. Doctors rushed. Doors opened. My name was called again and again in instructions. Each time it sounded different. Not like background noise anymore, but like authority. Hours passed. The waiting room stayed tense. No one spoke much. Because the dynamic had changed permanently. I was no longer standing outside their world. I was holding the key inside it. At one point, my mother-in-law tried to sit beside me, then stopped, as if she wasn't sure she had the right anymore. That hesitation said everything. My husband finally broke the silence. "I didn't realize how much you were doing for us all these years." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because it was late. Late understanding is always heavier than early appreciation. I looked at him. "I wasn't doing it for recognition," I said. "I was doing it because I was expected to disappear while doing it." He didn't respond. Because there was no argument against that. Later, a nurse came out again. This time her tone was calmer. "Condition is stable." The room released a breath it didn't know it was holding. But something else had changed permanently. Not the patient. Not the hospital situation. The family. When we all returned home later, the house felt different. Same walls. Same furniture. But no longer the same hierarchy. The first meal after that day was silent. No orders. No instructions. No assumptions. Just awareness. My mother-in-law finally said something quietly. "I think we misunderstood many things." I looked at her and replied calmly. You didn't misunderstand, I said. You just never had to think about me as a person. That sentence stayed in the air. Not as anger, but as truth finally spoken out loud. Days passed, and slowly the way they treated me changed. Not dramatically, not instantly, but permanently. They started asking instead of instructing, speaking instead of assuming, listening instead of ignoring, because now they understood something simple. Respect doesn't come from status. It comes from necessity revealing truth. One evening I stood in the kitchen alone. No one called me for tasks. No one waited for service. And I realized something I had never felt in that house before. Peace. My phone buzzed. A message from my husband. Thank you for saving her life. I stared at it for a long time. Then replied, I didn't save her life. Pause. I just made sure mine was finally seen. And for the first time, that was enough.